Movies and television have always been my passion, and over the course of my lifetime, I've watched thousands of movies and untold hours of TV, and I'm lucky enough that I now get to do it for my job. But watching all of that stuff, especially from a very young age, means that there are some things that leave a lasting impression. And as I think everybody can relate to, sometimes you see something that really leaves an impression in a negative way, or at least in a way that leaves a little bit of scar tissue behind. So I wanted to break down 20 movie and TV moments that definitely in some way shaped my psyche, maybe helped to inspire some of my biggest fears, or even my thoughts on life and death. So we're gonna go through them one by one, and I've really broken them down into 3 different categories that affected me in 3 different ways. First of all, we have moments from my childhood, even though some of those moments aren't really very scary looking back as an adult. Then we have some moments that were existential moments for me, where I really started to grapple with the idea of life and death and the greater purpose in the world. And then finally, the last 3 are jump scares. I've talked about the fact that I'm not a fan of jump scares. They're okay if they're well executed, and all the ones that we're going to talk about in this episode are well executed, but they're the reason why I tense up whenever any kind of movie, I don't care, it could be a Merchant Ivory period drama, any kind of movie gets really slow and quiet because I'm just waiting for that jump. And oh, by the way, because I am talking about traumatizing moments that are often tied to key plot points, I should issue a spoiler warning for just about anything from 1982 to, let's say, today. So let's jump into the first group, which are moments from my childhood that have stuck with me well into adulthood. And there are more of these moments than anything else because when you are a kid, these really do burrow into your brain. And there were some things, as I was kind of going back and looking at what I'd watched, that I didn't even remember, but the instant that I was reminded of them, it took me back to that time when I was 10 or 5 or sometimes younger. So pretty much starting at my youngest age, let's talk about 10 childhood movie and TV moments that absolutely traumatized me. Number 1, Evil Donald Duck, Down and Out with Donald Duck. This is maybe the first ever really scary movie and TV moment that I can ever remember. And I had to have been really young because I have distinct memories of watching this in my childhood home, the first house I lived in, which we moved away from when I was 5 years old. That's just how scary this moment was for me. Down and Out with Donald Duck was a TV special that aired in 1987 that was basically a greatest hits package presented as a 60 minutes type special, just a bunch of Donald Duck clips. Most of the show is zany Donald Duck antics, but at one point, he has a nightmare where he sees himself as an evil Donald Duck, and he wasn't the only one having nightmares about it.
What a terrible dream.
I haven't seen that clip in probably 35 years or longer, and yet, the second that I saw it, it brought back an instant sense memory of the moments leading up to it, of that dread, even knowing that it was coming, because I watched that special over and over again like kids do, and it scared me just as much every single time. And I gotta be honest, I think it's still pretty creepy. Evil Donald Duck is no joke. Number 2, The Old Man, Garfield's Halloween Adventure. This one doesn't hold up as well, or really at all, when it comes to creep factor as an adult, but it absolutely terrified me when I was a kid. Garfield's Halloween Adventure first aired in 1985 as a TV special. I must have seen it on a rerun because I didn't see it when I was 2 years old. Most of the show has to do with Garfield and Odie trick-or-treating, but at one point they visit an old rundown house and find a creepy old guy sitting inside.
This is more like it.
I don't know what it was about that guy, but I was absolutely petrified of him. I was scared that he was going to come and look in my window at night, and it wasn't until I rewatched some of this special that I realized that I actually conflated 2 moments from the Halloween special. There's the creepy old man in the house, and then there's a point where a ghost looks in the window, but the creepy old man never looked in the window, but that's just how your brain works when you're a kid. Regardless, the whole thing's topped off by Garfield returning home and turning the TV on only to find the old man, which was a great reminder to children that no matter where you run, even the safety of your own home, you'll never be safe from the horrors of the night.
Stay.
Number 3, Judge Doom, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Even if you didn't see those previous two moments, my guess is a lot of people, and particularly people my age, I think people that are around 40 years old are going to connect with this a lot more than younger people, because some of these are kind of obscure. But this is one that I think has crossed at least a couple of generations. Judge Doom is one of the best movie villains of all time. He's played brilliantly by Christopher Lloyd. You would think the most traumatizing thing he could do would be murdering an innocent cartoon shoe slowly and painfully in his first scene. But at the end of the movie, Judge Doom reveals his true Toon form and becomes somehow even scarier.
Remember me, Eddie?
When I kill your brother, I talk. Yes!
To a 5-year-old, weaponized cartoons is about as scary as you can get, and Judge Doom was the cartoon from hell. I've grown to appreciate the artistry of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I think it's one of those brilliant movies ever made in my adulthood, but I would be lying if I didn't say that Judge Doom still kind of gives me the creeps. Number 4, The Hillbilly Family, Pete's Dragon. If you haven't seen the original Pete's Dragon, it really is kind of something. It was like Disney set out to teach young kids what it was like when adults dropped acid. And one of the scariest things amid all the whimsy was the appearance of Pete's adopted hillbilly family, who were introduced to the film via jump scare. Pete's evil family only wants Pete so they can work him to the bone, and they openly threaten to beat and murder him through song. Plus, they're just dirty and gross.
Gonna snag him, gag him, drag him through town, put his head in the river, let the pup drown, trap him, strap him, wrap him in a sack, yeah!
As a kid, if things are working like they should, you think that adults are supposed to be safe and helpful, which is what Pete eventually finds in the movie. But a movie showing that the grown-ups that you depend on for everything could also be evil giants that want to kidnap and torture you is pretty disconcerting. I mean, at least the hillbilly family does get their comeuppance by getting even dirtier. I guess that's fair.
No, you're never gonna get away again! We're gonna put chains on you when you're working!
Number 5, The Robot Lady, Superman 3. Superman 3 is mostly a failed comic romp, with the notable exception of a plot turn that finds Superman evil, drunk, and vindictive.
What are you looking at? Huh?
However, what really messed me up was the climax in the movie when the villain's supercomputer sucks his sister inside and turns her into an evil robot lady. It wasn't so much the robot itself that scared me, it was the idea of being sucked in and turned into something evil against your will. And I think that it kind of was the beginning of Existential Dread, which has its own category coming up. So while the robot lady may, I mean, let's be honest, definitely does look cheesy now, to a kid, it really packed a punch. Number 6, The Subway, Ghostbusters 2. The Ghostbusters franchise has always been a mix of horror and comedy, and things like the Terror Dogs did freak me out when I was younger, but Ghostbusters 2 really dials up the horror in one sequence that isn't just scary for a horror comedy, it's scary for a horror movie. While Ghost Nanny Peter McNichol definitely gave me the creeps, the scene where the Ghostbusters explore an abandoned subway tunnel really got me. First, you have the setup where Winston's playful echo is returned by a demonic voice.
Hello?
And then comes the payoff when the Ghostbusters are assaulted with dozens of photo-real decapitated heads on spikes. Keep in mind, this wasn't Ghostbusters 1, which was a comedy that was mainly made for adults but crossed over to kids. This was Ghostbusters 2, when the franchise was in full Saturday morning cartoon mode, and yet they delivered this. You know, I always thought it was a coincidence, but the first time I saw Ghostbusters 2, true story, I went to the bathroom in the middle and just threw up all over the place. And I've always figured that, you know, it was a stomach bug or something like that, but now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it was a fear puke. I don't know, it was a long time ago. Number 7, Clowns, Pee-Wee's Big Adventure. When most people talk about creepy things in Pee-Wee's Big Adventure, they reference Large Marge, and don't get me wrong, she is super scary.
It looked like this.
But there's one thing that I am still scared of to this day because of Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and it's not old trucker ladies, it's clowns. First, you have a demented vision in Pee-wee's head of the smiling robo-clown that he chains his bike to, an image bound to make you scared of clowns for the duration of your childhood. But then Tim Burton really locks that fear in for life with a nightmare sequence that has maybe the most disturbing clown moment ever, and I am including every version of it. I'm highlighting the scary stuff, but I really do think that Pee-wee's Big Adventure is a delightful movie that kids can enjoy that just so happens to have moments of abject horror in the middle, aka pretty much every movie made for kids in the 1980s. Number 8, more clowns. Are You Afraid of the Dark? Are You Afraid of the Dark was a kids' horror show that aired on Saturday Night Nickelodeon, or SNICK, as the cool kids called it. It was about a group of kids called the Midnight Society who got together every week to tell scary stories around a campfire, and the show's second episode unleashed perhaps its most fearsome monster ever, Zeebo the Clown. Zeebo, who you never actually see move around, stalks a young kid through his house after the kid steals his nose on a dare, and even pulls the calls coming from inside the house routine.
One day's the best I'm gonna do.
Give it back. Give it back.
Do you want to know what's scarier than a clown that you can see? A clown that you can't see. So while Pee-wee's Big Adventure was the origin of my clown phobia, this show definitely made sure it would stick around for life. Number 9, The Troll, Ernest Scared Stupid. When I say the name horror, the character of Ernest P. Worrell probably isn't the first or even the 100th name that you think of. Jim Varney's certified doofus started out in commercials and was spun off into his own series of films where he did things like go to camp, save Christmas, go to jail, and be in Africa. Okay, moving on. In the Halloween-themed Ernest movie, Ernest Scared Stupid, he finds himself fighting against an evil group of trolls who like to kidnap kids and turn them into wooden statues. Already scary, right? It's enough to make any kid want to run to bed and hide under the covers. But what if the covers themselves aren't safe? That is the complex psychological question asked by Ernest Scared Stupid. I remember nights after seeing this movie where I refused to sleep on my side. I would sleep on my back because I was worried that if I rolled over either way, when I turned back around, there would be a troll in bed with me. And when you think about it, that's a pretty heavy psychological burden to be delivered by, inarguably, one of the dumbest characters of all time.
I'd like to thank you each and every one for this beautiful bowling trophy. Thank you, 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 thank you.
Number 10, The Arsonist, Unsolved Mysteries. Unsolved Mysteries was a show on NBC hosted by Robert Stack, who I knew exclusively as the guy from Unsolved Mysteries for most of my childhood. For an hour each week, he'd walk around the fog in a trench coat and bookend recreations of real unsolved mysteries, ranging from kidnappings to UFO encounters to the paranormal.
Watch closely. You may be able to help solve a mystery.
One segment, though, scared me more than any other segment, and it didn't have to do with ghosts and aliens and stuff like that. That was creepy. This one started out pretty innocuously with the discovery of a videotape on the side of the road alongside, as Robert Stack puts it,
several audio cassettes of heavy metal music.
So what was behind this metal-loving litterbug mystery? Well, it turns out that the tape was of a house fire, narrated by a voice that can only be described as teenage wannabe Charlie Manson.
Look at the flames. Listen to the coyotes yell. Listen to them. Good night.
Listening back to it now, and I actually haven't watched it since I was a kid, it is clear that that is the voice of a teenager doing his super best to be edgy and demonic. But when I was young, that was the voice of evil. And because of the premise of the show, Unsolved Mysteries, the big kicker at the end was that this arsonist was still out there. Maybe he's in your hometown.
205 feeds into several major highways, so authorities believe the fire could have happened anywhere in the United States.
I went to bed for a week convinced that I'd hear this evil laugh while a clearly deranged lunatic burned my house down and taped it. And it actually ended in a ban of Unsolved Mysteries in my house because my mom was tired of me being scared all the time. And yes, it does not hold up now, but that's just the way the brain works. When you're 9 years old, these are the things that scare you. And I have never forgotten that episode of Unsolved Mysteries, even though most people probably wrote it off as just some stupid kid.
It frightened me. As a matter of fact, I thought about it that night when I went to bed.
All right, so let's move on from the traumatizing childhood moments to the ones that first made me think about the concept of life and death. The idea that not everybody, including myself, is going to be around forever. And I was introduced to this concept very early on from one of my favorite movie stars. Number 11, Thomas J., My Girl. Picture this, it's late 1991, just the year before. Home Alone was one of the biggest hits of all time, and a few months earlier, it finally hit home video, so you've been watching it practically nonstop. To an 8-year-old kid, or at least for me at that time, Macaulay Culkin was like the coolest kid around. He got to live like the dream life, and so I was super excited because he was going to be in a brand new movie that was hitting theaters that fall called My Girl, where he plays a kid named Thomas J. who spends the summer palling around with his best friend, who you also kind of have a crush on, at least I did, and he even gets to kiss her. And then as the movie heads towards its conclusion and you're wondering are they going to be together forever, he dies. He dies suddenly and devastatingly, killed by bees, nature's most common threat. And not only does he die, you get to see his funeral. And not only do you get to see his funeral, you get to see his body in the coffin, as his best friend says the most heartbreaking stuff ever.
And where is his glasses? He can't see without his glasses. Put his glasses on. Put on his glasses.
Such was the experience of watching My Girl as a kid. It was a sweet coming-of-age comedy that also taught you the lesson that death is cruel, unfair, and potentially lurking around every corner. I can't speak for everybody else, but for 8-year-old me, it was enough to make my soul go... Number 12, The Nuke, Matinee. Matinee is a somewhat obscure film from director Joe Dante, who also famously directed The Burbs, about a young kid in 1960s Key West, Florida, who befriends a movie producer named Lawrence Woolsey, played by John Goodman. Woolsey's in town to promote his new sci-fi B-movie Mant, and most of the film is about this eccentric producer and the local kid he mentors, or mantors, as it were. But Matinee also takes place during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and in one scene, our young protagonist Gene wakes up in the middle of the night, opens the front door, and kablam! Joe Dante was great at making comedy mixed with horror, but mainly in like the Gremlins way, not the I wonder what a nuclear holocaust would be like way. And I think it says a lot that for a movie this obscure, when I was thinking of scenes for this video, this was one of the very first ones that I thought of.
Think if the bomb were about to fall, she'd do it with me? Ask her.
Number 13, Captain Amazing's Fate, Mystery Men. Mystery Men has grown a cult following since it flopped back in 1999, and I think rightfully so. I think it would have been an even bigger movie had it come out even 5 years later, and it was an early indicator of the upcoming obsession that everybody was going to have with superheroes. In the movie, a motley band of heroes comes together to rescue Champion City's invincible Captain Amazing. Now, it should be noted that Captain Amazing is a dick and was totally responsible for his own capture by the supervillain Casanova Frankenstein, but he still didn't deserve the cruel twist of fate that happens when the Mystery Men attempt to free him from Casanova's death machine. I remember watching that movie, and I was 16 years old, so I wasn't exactly a child, thinking, wait a minute, you can't do that, that's against the rules, he's a superhero, he's invincible. But no, they couldn't undo it. The death was permanent. Mystery Men helped teach me the lesson that death comes to even the most powerful and seemingly invincible people in the world, often suddenly and irrevocably, leaving behind a shattered world that must be pieced back together by the survivors. Not bad for a movie that also includes a superhero named the Spleen. I've got a lot more trauma to relive, but before we do, I want to thank my partner for this episode. This video is brought to you by Cuts. When you're running around with your crew this summer, you always want to be the most stylish one, and a good summer t-shirt is essential to standing out. But most t-shirts are either too stylish to be comfortable or too comfortable to be stylish until now. Cuts t-shirts are so high quality, wrinkle-free, and buttery soft that you can look like you're dressing up even when you're dressing down. I have one of Cuts' Forever tees, and it's a great thing to have, especially in the summer when a t-shirt is basically the only option when it comes to dressing for the heat. I paired it with a black pair of Icon pants for a great outfit that felt fancy but not dressy and was comfortable but also stylish. And Cuts isn't just about t-shirts and pants, they also make stretch to fit joggers that look better than a lot of regular pairs of pants, and all of their clothes are as comfortable as athleisure, making them perfect for any occasion. There's a reason Cuts clothing is the trusted fashion brand of professional athletes, and if you've ever watched your favorite team entering the arena, there's a good chance you've seen them sporting Cuts, and this is clothing that's built to last. You're gonna own these clothes for years to come, which makes Cuts a smart wardrobe investment. Embrace the summer state of mind with Cuts. For a limited time, viewers and listeners of the show get 20% off your entire order when you use the code DAN20 at checkout. That's 20% off your order at cutsclothing.com with the promo code DAN20. Please support the show and tell them that we sent you. Experience the perfect blend of style and comfort with Cuts Clothing.
Already on the
Number 14, the Log Truck, Final Destination 2. There are two types of drivers cruising around America's highways. The ones who are scarred by Final Destination 2 and the ones who haven't seen it. The ones who've never seen the movie will see a log truck and either pass it or inexplicably choose to drive behind it, but those who have seen the movie will either slam on the brakes to create some distance or speed past that log truck like their life depends on it. Because to those of us in the know, your life very well may depend on putting as much distance as you can between yourself and those surely unstable logs. Final Destination movies always start out with a big disaster that has to be avoided in order for our characters to cheat death for the rest of the movie, and in the second movie, the big accident is a massive highway chain reaction that's set into motion when the chain on a log truck snaps and unleashes its payload on the unsuspecting motorists. The ensuing carnage is so unforgettable that it has changed my driving behavior completely. I actually can't think of any other movie that has tied itself to one particular image, the log truck, as much as Final Destination 2 has in my mind. It's the only thing I think about when I'm driving and I see one of those things, and it's the only thing that I can think about until I pass it as quickly as I can, lest I die a horrible death or cheat that horrible death, then get into creepy conversations with Tony Todd, and then die a horrible death.
You can't cheat death. There are no escapes.
Number 15, The Baseball Kid, Dr. Sleep. I think Dr. Sleep is actually criminally underrated. It's the 2019 sequel to The Shining, directed by Mike Flanagan, and it also features maybe the most disturbing movie scene for me in recent history. The movie features a pack of roaming psychic vampires who live off the steam given off by people that they victimize and murder, and at one point they kidnap a kid walking home from Little League who just happens to be played by Jacob Tremblay. We see the group kidnap the kid, and I remember thinking, well, that's a weird role for Jacob Tremblay to play because he'd already been in Room. He was recognized as a really talented young actor, and he's going to play this bit part where he's a kid who gets kidnapped, and obviously they're going to murder him. But once he's kidnapped, we're never going to see him again. Maybe he just liked Stephen King and wanted to be part of the movie. Well, in a huge violation of what most movies shy away from, the kid isn't killed off screen. He's killed on screen, brutally, and in parts I don't have the heart to show you even here. And we get to hear and see his horrified reaction throughout, and then see the horrified reaction of Dan Torrance and his friend Billy when they dig up the kid's body. This actually marked a major shift in how I experienced existential dread through movies, because this one wasn't about how these horrible things in the world would affect me. It was about how these horrible things in the world affect other people, namely this poor kid. It's a demonstration of the worst capabilities of a cruel and uncaring world. I've seen hundreds of kills and countless horror movies, but I don't think that I can point to a movie death in a horror movie that's as disturbing as this one. Legitimately. I mean, it is absolutely chilling.
Kid, you were good.
All right, let's get to our final category here and our final 5 scares, and they are jump scares. If you've seen me review a horror movie before, you know that I've said that I don't like jump scares, and I can be hard on horror movies that I think are bad because it is psychologically taxing for me to be on the edge of my seat for so long because it's just the anticipation of it. Well, that fear of jump scares definitely comes from these 5 movies because they're executed so perfectly and were so effective that I never feel 100% safe in any theater. Number 16, The Head, Jaws. 80s kids and seeing a movie a few years before they probably should. Name a more iconic duo. I've seen Jaws more times than I can remember, and yet I can still recall with crystal clarity the very first time Ben Gardner's head popped out of that boat during Hooper's ill-fated fact-finding mission. Jump scares, especially when you're not used to them, are very strange experiences. They activate, at least for me, a primal fight or flight response that's akin to an out-of-body experience. Your brain is telling you that you need to be anywhere else, and yet you stay firmly planted right there on your grandmother's couch. The Jaws jump scare is so effective because of the timing and the way it lulls you into a false sense of security. If anything, you're expecting the shark, not some poor fisherman's head. But it works incredibly well, and Spielberg's famous reshooting of this scene has to be one of the biggest payoffs to additional shooting in film history. Several years later, I watched Jaws with my uncle, who I loved watching movies with, and he'd seen Jaws before, but it had been a very long time, and he obviously didn't have that same recall about the Ben Gardner head thing, because we were watching it at his house, and he was in a recliner leaned back, and when Ben Gardner's head popped out of that boat, he literally almost somersaulted backwards. That recliner was hanging on for dear life. And I think that's one of the interesting things about scares and jump scares and even a lot of these moments is they affect you deeply, and yet you can't wait to inflict that on the people that you know and love. Number 17, Arbogast's Death, Psycho. Strangely enough, I watched Psycho for the first time at my other grandmother's house, and I'm going to date myself here. It was literally the 11 o'clock Saturday night movie on one of the local broadcast stations. Now, I knew of Psycho, and I'd already seen the shower scene and countless specials about Hitchcock and movie history, but I wasn't familiar at all with the rest of the movie, and that's why the private investigator Arbogast's death took me so by surprise. It's a masterclass in slow build tension with Hitchcock focusing on Arbogast's slow walk up the stairs and Mother's bedroom door slowly opening. And then comes the big jump moment, which I think is timed perfectly because you get it right before Arbogast hits the top of the stairs. This isn't talked about nearly as much as the shower scene, but I think it actually scared me more, maybe because I'd already been exposed to that other scene so many times. And when you are, I think, a preteen or maybe a young teenager, and you see that for the first time along with the rest of the movie, and then you have to walk through an entire dark house around a lot of blind corners, that scene replays itself in your head over and over again. Psycho is full of so many great moments, but this has always been my favorite scare in the entire film. Number 18, Surgery, Independence Day. Jump scares at a certain point become kind of a muscle memory, and you can see them coming, which is why I think a lot of directors try to play with the game a little bit and put them in places where you're either not suspecting them or time them at times that you're not suspecting them. And the head popping open in Independence Day is a perfectly executed jump scare. The scientists are operating on this alien, you're aware that something is probably going to happen, but the quickness and the actual volume of the alien suddenly bursting open while Brent Spiner is slowly cutting through its tissue was a great crowd moment.
It's right in.
I remember sitting in a packed theater right around the time Independence Day came out, and I'd already seen the movie, so I was watching the audience because I knew what was actually coming, and you could see them lift up out of their chairs when that happened, including my uncle, who was there, the same uncle who was there watching the movie with me, and these were actually those rocking theater seats before they did the full automated recline, and he almost flipped over that seat as well. Pro tip here, rocking chairs or recliners are not a good match with jump scares, especially when my uncle's involved. As fun as it was to see the reaction to this moment with the crowd, it still was a moment that got me the first time I saw it, and I think it started opening up those pathways in my brain to be really on my guard whenever a scene gets too quiet. I'm just expecting something to happen. Sometimes that helps my movie experience, sometimes that hurts my movie experience, but either way, I have Independence Day in large part to thank.
Now comes the really icky part. Ugh.
Number 19, The Tent Girl, The Sixth Sense. Only one other scare at the time that I saw it kept me up more nights than this one did, but the tent girl scene in The Sixth Sense was, to that point, the scariest moment in a movie theater I had ever had. I mean, M. Night Shyamalan knew how to deliver in that movie. We all know that Haley Joel Osment's Cole in The Sixth Sense can see dead people because it practically became the movie's catchphrase. One night, as the temperature drops indicating that ghosts are near, Cole flees into a safety tent only for it to start unclipping itself, and then in a brilliantly timed shot, the camera pans down to a vomiting girl sitting right in front of him. I was petrified when I saw that. That single image haunted my dreams from sundown to sunup for at least a couple weeks afterward. Maybe it's because I am legitimately afraid of ghosts. This is no joke. My number one rule in life is to never do anything that might get you haunted. I am like the anti-Ghostbuster. Are there ghosts? Yep, I'm afraid of them. So this was sort of like my worst nightmare, and this was also before Misha Barton was on the OC, so I had no real-life context to who this girl was. I legitimately lost sleep over this one, but not as much sleep as I lost over the next moment, which I think is one of the most perfectly executed, if not the most perfectly executed jump scares that I've ever seen, and it's from the same director. Number 20, The Birthday Party, Signs. Do you know what legitimately creeps me out more than ghosts? Aliens. Because when you grew up in the 90s, you were taught that aliens were gray-faced invaders who would peep in your windows, snatch you out of your house, and take you to their ship and probe you who knows where. That message stuck, and so between ghosts and aliens, M. Night Shyamalan's early filmography felt like an attack on me personally. And as effective as Sixth Sense was, Signs was twice as effective. The creepy factor in Signs is high. There are actually 5 or 6 moments in that movie that give me chills to this day when I even think about them. But the birthday party scare is so well done. Aliens are invading, but nobody really knows what's happening until the world sees amateur video from a birthday party in Brazil. Joaquin Phoenix is watching on TV, and we're basically watching with him. We know that there's something happening, something's going on, and then...
It's behind!
The most terrifying thing is that the alien is there from the start. We just don't see it, which makes it even scarier. It's such a simple scare, but the build-up, the music, the timing, it all works perfectly, and it scared me to death. I was 19 years old, it was summer, I was home from college, but my mom was out of town, so the house was going to be empty for the entire week. I saw Signs late at night, and then I came home looking out the window at my empty backyard thinking what could possibly be lurking out there. And for the second time in 3 years, M. Night Shyamalan literally kept me up at night. That image haunted me for weeks afterward, and still does to a certain extent. And it's great proof that a truly frightening, lasting scare doesn't need to be complicated. Sometimes all that's required is simplicity. So those are 20 movie and TV moments that seriously screwed me up. Are there some on this list that you share? Are there others that I didn't talk about? I know a lot of people would say The Never-Ending Story, but I didn't really watch that movie when I was a kid. Let me know down in the comments below, and as always, thank you so much for watching this video. Stay tuned right here for more movie news, reviews, box office, and more. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.